How's it going, folks? My name's Matthew, aka EZBOT, and today we're taking a look at the Elektron Syntakt in 2026. And from what I understand, the last update to the Syntakt, while it was pretty deep and kind of fundamentally changed the box entirely by adding samples to it, might have been the last update to the Syntakt. I'm not entirely sure we'll be seeing more updates to the unit, and what does that mean for you as a Syntakt user? So I wanted to share a little bit of my thoughts on the Elektron Syntakt. I have a lot of experience with it. I've used it at countless live shows. I did some of the early tutorials even before and or launch videos for it when it released. I've had it for a very long time. I've been teaching it forever. And when it first came out, my honest to God thought about it, this was before Digitone 2, was that it would completely replace my Digitone. And for about a year and a half, roughly, I think, it did. It completely replaced my Digitone. It didn't replace my Digitakt, as I have a particular workflow that I like to do for my sample production. I love to sample, and I prefer to have my drums sampled if I can. That being said, the Syntakt has fantastic drum engines, and now it has samples, so I have best of both worlds, honestly, in the unit as of 2026. Then the Digitone 2 came out, and it kind of I don't know. It was just such a huge release that it kind of pushed the Syntakt off to the side, and Elektron spent a lot of their energy updating the Digitone 2 and making sure that it was comfortable and working well, as everyone would expect as they pick up their new 16 voice, 16 track synthesizer, which also had, little tiny samples as PCMs in there for its drum synth engines. So it was a powerhouse immediately. And the Syntakt kind of went by the wayside. And then eventually we got this amazing update with the twin shot and a couple other features. And honestly, I can't even remember all the features that came in the last update. So what I wanted to do today is kind of talk about the Syntakt. Who is it for? Who was it for? And who will it be for in the future from my personal perspective? And the reason why I think it's even relevant that we even ask this question, because it's a clicky idea, right? Click on this, listen to this thing, is because I really get this question all the time, right? I'm teaching these boxes, I do these live streams, and particularly my favorite gear is Elektron, so I'm constantly bringing Elektron gear onto my channel and showing it off because I think the sequencer, which I believe makes the instrument, is the sequencer, is my favorite instrument in electronic music. Is the Elektron sequencer, and that's why I continue to use their boxes across the board. It doesn't really matter what engines it has along with it. I like the sequencer, and the Syntakt has my favorite sequencer. So would I continue to use the box? Absolutely. Now, for those of you who are thinking about picking up a Syntakt, what would I have to say to you in particular with the current lineup that is available? So we have a Digitakt 2, and the Digitakt 2 is a 16-track stereo sampler with some incredible features. You can have, countless samples, countless sounds loaded or presets. You can chop like you would on the Octatrack. It's really powerful. So that one's kind of stands on its own. It doesn't really need a partner, but it is good to have a synthesizer paired with your sampler. I 100% believe that to be just a fact. Despite it being able to do great monophonic stuff. And then we have the Digitone 2, which I said is 16 tracks, 16 voices of polyphony, and even has its own synth engines. And all of these Digi boxes, which are the smaller format, have overbridge, which is incredible. Multi-tracking USB audio into your DAW, either pre or post fader for live effects processing and or just live multi-tracking into your DAW, which is awesome, a great workflow. The Syntakt offers that, and the Syntakt has a great feature set in general. So now when we think about these, the Digitakt 2, we have the Digitone 2, we have the Syntakt, we have the analog rhythm, which seems to have just vanished into the ether, sadly. I still think is one of the best drum machines of all time, and even though I don't use it very often, it's just because I'm really set in my ways, I do still believe it is maybe the best drum machine currently available is the Rhythm Mark 1 or Mark 2. Probably people would argue the Mark 2 just because of the sampling, but the Rhythm Mark 1 is by far one of the prettiest and most fun drum machines on the planet. There's no doubt in my mind. What the Syntakt is is a combination of the components of your Rhythm Mark 1 or Mark 2 and the model cycles. Another incredibly popular device that I also have not seen Elektron give any attention to. And I actually haven't asked them about that, and I should do that. But the model series introduced the model samples and the model cycles, and these were these much more affordable, no overbridge, no USB. I mean, I think it has USB audio, but this very new and nuanced workflow where everything is on the top of the panel, everything. So you didn't really have to dive into anything. The Syntakt didn't exactly take that from the model cycles, but it took everything else. And the model cycles is and was the FM engine from the Digitone 1. So we have the Digitone 1 in the model cycles, we have the Rhythm, and then we take, sorry, I had an itch, and then we take the Rhythm's analog engines and the model cycles digital engines, which is the Digitone, and we put them into one box, give it overbridge, give it 12 tracks, analog filter, overdrive, and a Digi faceplate in the Digi workflow, and a more expanded sequencer, because the sequencer on the Digi boxes is more powerful than the sequencer on the model cycles and or the analog Rhythm, despite the Rhythm having the different way to transition between patterns, which is a really powerful feature and a lot of people use with their Rhythm on its own right. And that's what you get with your model cycles. So now we have the model cycles with samples in it. That's the newest thing that happened. And it's not that it can sample. You get 64 slots. It's kind of a perma thing. So like you plug it into your computer, you put those 64 slots, you can't switch those slots out. You put them in, it's cooked into the Syntakt until you take them out from your computer and replace it with new samples. I think that's just fine. So the idea behind TwinShot, as many of us know, was to give us sampled hi-hats. Not exactly just to have samples, but from what I understand from Elektron was that they wanted it to have hi-hats, like hi-hats that didn't sound like synthesized hi-hats. But it, of course, opened up way more than that. So, and we're going to play with that today. So I would say this. If you're looking to pick up one of the Digi boxes, whether it be a Digitone, a Digitakt, or a Syntakt, for one, I would say get all three, because I think they're all absolutely fire, and they're equally deserving of their own I don't know, experience. Like, you should definitely try them all because they are totally different from each other, despite them all having the same instrument inside of them, the Elektron sequencer. The Syntakt exceptionally shines at techno production. I'd say more so than the Digitone even, and more so than a Digitakt, even though the Digitakt, like any sampler, is a chameleon. But I mean, the Syntakt, if you're interested in that like warehousey, hard techno experience, and you love the sound of gritty analog oscillators, the Syntakt is insane. And it sounds so good. Those engines, the dual VCO in particular, is so good. And the drum engines are the engines from the analog Rhythm. So amazing. The analog Rhythm came out like a decade ago. So it's an old machine, and to this day, it's still considered one of the best drum machines, kind of all time, I'd say, from, modern music production, modern music producers. And we have that in an Elektron Syntakt. So if you see one of these used, local and or on Reverb or whatever, pick one up. I don't think you'll regret it. It's such a powerful box, and it sounds absolutely amazing. So that being said, I really do believe that if you're a techno producer and you want to do hardware techno production, you could get into modular, or you could get yourself a Syntakt. Or you could do both, of course. But if you're coming from fresh eyes and you've not really dabbled in either place, modular or a groove box, I think there is no more premium groove box at the price for techno production in particular that's going to give you those dark and gritty sounds with a lot of hands-on workflow that sounds really good. And that's what I think the Syntakt shines at. Now, I don't want to be just fawning and fanboying over Elektron as I often do, because I really do like it that much. But I do have a particular sound palette that I like. And I don't like everything that's inside of the Syntakt. It's not everything that I want to use for the music that I like to do. While I enjoy making techno production, and ambient style music, which this does pretty well too. And I think any of these boxes would do that pretty decent. And they all can do techno, which is fine. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying one is the one you should only get. I just mean that it excels in that particular category of doing techno production. And you'll see it a lot on a lot of other channels, or asking your friends who are also in music production and in hardware music production, what do they use the Syntakt for? And they'll probably say they've been doing some techno production with it. But I do think there's a lot of sounds in the Syntakt that I don't use and that I don't really care for or need. So just to be, fully transparent and honest from my own perspective, what do I think about the Syntakt? For me, I use a Digitone 2 in most of my production because I bounce from ambient to synthwave to house to drum and bass. And not that this can't do all those genres, but I like having polyphony. And so for me, when I took out my Digitone and I popped in the Syntakt, I lost polyphony and I had to start sampling chords into my Digitakt, or I had to use the chord engine on the Syntakt. So let's talk about this. Let's just start with a discussion about these engines. We're going to do some music production today because that's what I want to do. I'm actually going to make some techno because that's what I believe that this excels at. And to also prove points on how dope the sound engines are on this and where some of the sound engines are lacking. But we'll start with the chord engine before we go into the engines that are just absolutely fire, which is all the analog engines. And honestly, if this was just analog engines, it would probably be much larger, but it would be so cool. I would love to see Elektron make another Syntakt, a Syntakt 2 or something that just is all about analog and just forgoes all the digital stuff. We don't need any of it. The chord engine, let's check it out. There it is. By default, it's on track 6. For me, track 6 is supposed to be hi-hats because I come from the Digi brain, the Digitakt, and it's always a hi-hat on track 6. I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. The chord engine is also from the model cycles. And this was just to give you a sense of polyphony. It uses a paraphonic engine. If you're not familiar with paraphonic, it means that it's going to give you polyphony in terms of notes, but it's not going to give you polyphony in terms of full voices. So you're going to get these voices that are all being channeled through the same filter and envelope generator and amplifier. And it has a particular sound. They sound encapsulated, like it sounds like somebody took a chord and they wrapped a bag around the chord. And that's what a paraphonic chord sounds like. It's held onto by that wrapper of one filter and one amplifier, and it doesn't enunciate every single note in a chord very well. So you have a particular sound for it. It's more of a blur of a chord than anything else. While this engine can be cool, and you can do other weird stuff with it, like going the other direction and going into unison, you can hear how incredibly digital it sounds. It has a wave morphing selector here where you can morph through these like a wavetable. But none of them are very gritty, right? They're really soft. They all sound like they're kind of stemming from a triangle or a sine wave, and that's the sound of this engine. Because it is FM. And that does sound good. And if we go in and we can edit our reverb and delay on all the digiboxes, if we go in and edit our reverb, let's bring this decay up and maybe even open up the top end, because by default, Elektron has decided that it should darken our reverb and delay and also keep the decay quite short, except for on the Tonewerk where they changed all of that and they made some other choices for us, like quarter notes by default, and the reverb and decay or the reverb and delay are huge by default. We'll give this a really big decay time, and while we're talking about it, let's make our delay a ping pong delay. And this discussion on the Syntakt that I'm having and talking to some students in particular who I've met with the last couple of weeks that have been talking about this box, that's kind of what prompted me to discuss this now, because I do teach these units, and if you're interested in picking up lessons from me, you can join the Patreon, which is patreon.com/EZBOT or EZBOT.live, and you can sign up for lessons, and I'll teach you how to use these boxes to the best of my ability. And I know them really well, so that could be a good time for us both. But by default, your ping pong delay is not set up as a ping pong delay, it's just set up as a stereo delay. So not to say that when you have it on ping pong that it's not in stereo, but the width parameter becomes panning left and right. So if I have it at the positive value, we're going to have the delay is going to go to the right side of my ear, right? It's going to go to my right ear because it's just going to pan to the right side. But when we set it on ping pong, this becomes how much far left and how much far right the delay becomes. Now there's advantages and disadvantages to both of these things, but so you decide how you want it to do, but it will still ping in stereo in the other version. I just want to point that out. Okay, so I go over to my amplifier. I'm going to send some reverb to this chord that we have, a minor 7, and we can play with this balance, which is like emphasizing certain notes in our chord. As you can hear, it's doing it in a different way, in a unique way to this engine, but you can hear what it's doing. If it was a keyboard, you could hear that we were moving down inversions, basically. Send some reverb to it. Sounds awesome. Go down an octave. Like, we could get into dub techno territory, and mind you, it would be a very soft version of that music production, and not that that's a bad thing. But yeah, it sounds great. And I love having this engine. Will it replace Digitone 2's chord engine, like an actual polyphonic synthesizer? Not at all. Not for me. So I just want to point that out for users who pick this up. It is a monophonic machine with a chord engine to give you that sense of polyphony if you wanted to make chords in your production on this box, but that's not what this is for. This is supposed to be a jam box, something you could pick up and just kind of like make patterns on very quickly, and also, I think, in particular, techno. But the chord engine is dope, but also leaves you wanting a little bit, I think. So I wanted to talk about that a bit. I think that engine is cool, and it does the trick, but it still doesn't do the trick for polyphony. Now, if I was to like switch this engine out with, say, Twin Shot, and then I selected one of my samples on Twin Shot, here's a chord from Twin Shot. Let's just go over to the low. Because I have samples now in my Syntakt, I can kind of like bypass the fact that the chord engine sounds the way it sounds. And it sounds awesome. These are like a filtered chord. It has its own reverb probably in the sample. I can't remember. But I can also apply a secondary filter to it, which is actually really good for a production like dub techno in particular, which I really like making. We have a different selection of filters than we do on the Digitone or the Digitakt 2. We have these like EQ options as opposed to a filter called EQ, and we don't have a bandpass. So we don't have like a filter that will isolate a certain frequency. We have filters that will emphasize frequencies and or de-emphasize certain frequencies, and that, is good or bad, I guess, for you. I don't know. You can make a phaser out of one of them if you wanted, but I do like having bandpass filters, and I don't particularly have one here. And to me, that makes me sad. You can kind of emulate it a bit by going over here and using your bass width filter, which is your secondary filter, and you can isolate a zone, but it doesn't have an emphasis of that zone. You have to emphasize again in your top filter. But this is a trick that you can do on your Syntakt to kind of get that bandpass experience. You also have an analog filter. You can run this all through, which is cool in its own right, but we'll get over to that. So Twin Shot can kind of pull a bit of magic, pull a rabbit out of its hat and kind of replace the fact that you don't have proper polyphony by using the Twin Shot engine over the chord engine, which for me, honestly, I would do 99% of the time because that engine sounds very particular. Like, it just sounds very samey to me. While it does a great job of doing what it does, I don't want to use it all the time. I can't use it in every track, even if I want to have chords in every single song I write. I'm not going to use the chord engine every single time because I'm going to be making music that sounds the same over and over again. So that to me is, I'm glad that Twin Shot showed up and allowed me to enter those samples. Some of the other engines are these other digital engines. They're all Model Cycles engines. If you've played on your Model Cycles, you already know what those sound like. They are FM engines with some parameters macroed, pre-assigned for you so that when you turn one knob, you get you know, some strong changes to your sound. That way these engines feel substantial. And they can be kind of cool. So if we go over here, select a new engine, we have a couple of synth engines for our drums. We have our modern bass drum, which sounds like that one. And we have a snare drum. It sounds basic. This is the vintage, sorry. Here's the basic. And these are FM engines, and they sound like they're FM engines to me. And the Twin Shot's going to do a lot of heavy lifting. As I mentioned when the update came out with Twin Shot, I was like, this is going to be just twin shotting all over the place. Everyone's just going to end up using tons of twin shots because they're going to want to have those samples. The drum engines on the digital side aren't anything to like write home about, but they kind of are good enough to get you moving. Now I want to, boomerang back over to the drum engines because I think they're actually really great for not doing drums. And they're fantastic for doing techno production for your synth lines. I'm going to give you an example of that in just a second. And we have our clap vintage, which sounds good. I actually really like that. This is why they gave you twin shot, from what I understand, is because these, whether it's digital or analog, this hat just kind of sounds extremely synthesized and very, very metallic. Now the other core, like these synth engines, it's my opinion that if you wanted to like make techno production, and that's what people are usually wanting to do with this box, that's why I was yammering on about it so much in the beginning of the stream, is that I would kind of maybe avoid using these engines a bit, unless it's like you're doing your bass line, or you have a particular style of techno that you're trying to do or something where you're allowing yourself to use more than just a couple of notes, because typically you kind of stay away from using too many notes. While you can detune these, you kind of have to force your brain to go to a space that takes you outside of like classical music production, where you're thinking in notes and going C, E, G, B, you know what I mean? To like, you're not usually thinking in that way when you're doing a lot of improvisational electronic music. You're more like thinking in sound design, atmosphere, and tone, and less about progression and like 4-part harmony style writing. I don't know how else to put it. These engines, they excel at doing classic synth sounds, digital synth sounds, FM synth sounds. Although I'd say the Swarm does a great job of getting you away from feeling like you have an FM engine. It just sounds like a bunch of sawtooths. So this one's actually, I think, really great for doing bass lines. Or those really dark, evil leads. Throw some vibrato on it or something. I mean, that sounds pretty good, right? And this is the Swarm engine, which we got on the Digitone polyphonically, which blew my mind. I think I critiqued Elektron when the Digitone 2 came out and it had the Swarm engine and you could use it in polyphonically, 16 voice Swarm engine, which means there's just like a bajillion sawtooths that you could detune, which is pretty cool in its own right. I regret critiquing them about that because I've used that engine a lot now, but I thought it was kind of funny that they threw it in there. But it sounds awesome, and I was so grateful to have it here because it really was a great addition to the Syntakt. But I think this engine sounds awesome, and you might end up using this one quite a bit for your techno production. The toy engine is physical modeling, And this is a great place for you to get some really inharmonic tones as well. I mean, it's supposed to like emulate physical modeling. I believe it's, once again, it's just FM. And this punch thing, that comes directly from model cycles. And the idea that we have these multiple decay envelopes, like we have a decay envelope that applies to the amplifier here. It doesn't apply to these parameters. It is to the amplifier output here, and it runs back into the amplifier again, which is by default set to infinity here. But then that overrided? Seems to override the decay envelope. This is an interesting way it was implemented. I do like this one for some of the techno production too, because you can get those really inharmonic sounds, as I was saying. But it's not a very deep engine, and none of the digital engines are, like, very deep. Like, just to be transparent and totally honest here, the digital engines are pretty simple. They only have a couple parameters. Each one of the engines is really just the same engine, but a different way of it being configured and a different way for you to work with it. So it kind of puts you in a specific zone for production, which I think the engine concept in general with Elektron is actually a really good workflow. Like, I particularly like the engine concept, or the machine concept. I believe that's, that's what we would call it on Elektron. The machine concept helps remove scope creep and keeps you centered in the production that you're doing. And also, it's that same idea where I use this term a lot, in like the walled garden type thing, where there's plenty for you to explore, but it's like you can't go too far. But there's enough for you to explore, and there's enough good sounds. You're kind of just in a zone of good sounds, and you can stick there, and you can't get too far away from it. Even applying your modulators, which you don't have a ton of, 2 LFOs versus 5 on ToneVerk, or 5 modulators on ToneVerk versus 3 on Digitech 2 and Digitone 2. So it's, it definitely has less in that regard. But, you can still get some weird stuff. They do audio rate the LFOs on all the Elektron boxes, including the Syntakt. So you can take it into a further distorted and inharmonic territory if you want, as opposed to just doing what I did here and applying vibrato. Which I do wish, and I'll continue to wish this forever, that Elektron just adds vibrato by default. Just add vibrato to everything. Just have that be a thing. We don't need to just, just give us the vibrato parameter like we have on the multi-samples on ToneVerk, and we'll be so happy, and then we don't have to waste an LFO to get vibrato on our synth engines, because it is, to me, it's just a total waste of my LFO when it's something so simple as just a, pretty slow moving sine wave or triangle. Then we have the tone engine, which is like the closest we're going to get to the classic FM engine. It's like syn tone, but it's FM tone, basically. It even has ratio. And this sounds just like the model cycles, right? You can really hear that it's an FM engine now. But all the engines, they do have this like nice sweet spot for you to get into the weird zone, right? And that's just one of the features of FM. Like, FM lets you get inharmonic in general. And I was saying before that I was like, I think these engines, they're best for like not doing that as much compared to like the drum engines, which are really like percussive and kind of like they're detuned on purpose, which I think excels at techno production. These ones are, more focused in your classic music production, or like melodic production is what I mean to say. That doesn't mean that they can't get super weird, because you can get super weird on these boxes no matter what. That's what the Elektron sequencer is all about to me. And I do want to like, kind of just like hammer on this point for a second. When I say like that the Elektron sequencer itself is the instrument and then everything else around it is just kind of like the drums that we're banging on, essentially. Like, I know the drums that you're banging on when you're at a drum kit is the instrument and you're playing the instrument. Um, but I do think that when it comes to like elect electronic instruments, the instrument is how it interacts with you. And like when you're at a drum kit or you're at a piano, how you interact with that instrument is like what makes that instrument special. It's not exactly the sound of the instrument, especially with electronic stuff, because instruments can also, the electronic instruments can sound like whatever they want them to sound like. It's all about how do you interact with that instrument. And I think the Elektron sequencer, the way you interact with the Elektron sequencer, is the most hands-on sequencer that I'm aware of. You know, besides like the Circlon, which is very similar to this same sequencer. Especially in like a groove box and something that's relatively affordable, getting the Elektron sequencer, it can sequence your whole studio, it can do polyphony and the parameter locking and that whole experience, holding a step and turning a knob. That is the instrument to me. Holding the step, turning the knob, having the LFOs, having the way that it presents the filter, the amplifier, the effects sends, and the retriggering and all that stuff. That to me is the superpower of all the boxes, whatever sound engine it has accompanying that particular part of the unit doesn't matter to me as much as the actual sequencer, because to me this Elektron is all about their sequencer and everything else is just cool. So that's why you can have this conversation in general, like which one should I get, a Digitakt or a Digitone or an Octatrack or a Rhythm or an Analog 4 or a Toneverk or a Cycles or a Samples or a Syntakt. All of that is only a conversation. Like, why would you even ask a conversation? You wouldn't go, should I get a TR-1000 or, should I get a Prophet 5? Like, it would be like, well, why? But you can ask this conversation about, like, what should I get the Syntakt or the Digitone, because they're so similar, because they're the same instrument, right? They're the same instruments because they have the same sequencer and they have the same relative feature set. Some of them have a little bit different. Somebody mentioned in the chat, just so you know, I can see you, is that you have track layering essentially on your Syntakt. There's a bunch of features in the Syntakt that they added that were really, really cool recently. I don't want to reinitiate a track sound, but sorry, I was going ham on that and I started looking at my Syntakt, getting carried away because I want to make some music on it, and that's what I plan to do now. But I think the instrument side of this box and the idea of that is really wrapped in the sequencer. And if you like these analog engines and you think the digital engines are enough for you, and also if you're new to making hardware electronic music in general, if you're brand new and you expect to fall in love with the box, then I think you could pick up a Syntakt and be happy forever with it. And it'd definitely be great for you to pick up as a new user an Elektron. And there's a couple different arguments you could have about like why I would say that about this. And one of them is that I think it's an easier box to learn. And that's partly because it has a shorter height for you to travel. So the Digitakt has kind of an infinite thing that it can do because it's a sampler and it's a really powerful sampler. And the Digitone has the polyphony side of it alone, kind of means that it's a harder unit to use in general, just because of it being polyphonic. You have to know how to build chords, even though it has like a bunch of features to help you build chords. But because of that, it kind of like says that there's an expertise that you can grow into, that you don't have to think about on the Syntakt. You can just kind of focus on percussion and groove and building out track by track in a monophonic sense. And that's a simpler thing to think about and to work on. So we were talking about these engines. We talked about the Swarm chord. We have the Bits engine as well. The Bits engine is the virtual analog, I guess I could say. It's just your basic synth engine. It has a noise parameter. You could use it just as a noise sweep if you wanted. Or you could even build some sort of snare with it, I guess. And you can also just turn the balance over to this oscillator side of things, which is what I do, and then play with the shapes. And you can lock in and bounce between shapes. This is some of the things I love about Elektron, the Elektron sequencer, to be honest, is the fact that they do things like this. Quality of life to me is memorizing these little workflow tricks where I can hold function and turn this and it's going to snap to waveforms, as opposed to interpolating between the waveforms like this, which is like smoothly moving between the wave shapes. And like, say I wanted to do pulse width modulation. Well, there isn't a pulse width modulation parameter here. And pulse width, and it doesn't even let you go fully 100% pulsed, I guess. That was one way to say it. That's probably not the right way to say it. But to go 100% with your pulse width would just make it a silent waveform, because it would just completely put the wave at the top and it would be nothing. So what we have to do to like make this do the classic like SH-101 sound that you would want, or just a pulse wave, I guess. I don't know why I said SH-101. It's just what I think of when I think of square waves. Is you got to go to one of your LFOs. Forgot you have to hit that. You can't use the encoders in this current setup that I have. Right now I have the plus and or the up and down buttons assigned to the octave. So you have to hit the LFO button for me. But if I go to my waveform, you can set the trig mode to trig, which means it'll reset your LFO every time you hit a key. If we target the wave, we'll go negative with it. We get our pulse width modulation, that is. With a nice overdrive. I think it sounds pretty damn good. And one of the things I really like is the filter. No arpeggiator though, which I think is an omission. Surprisingly good sounding virtual analog engine. I mean, I think that sounds really good. That's just me though. I think using this with doing the pulse width modulation is an overlooked trick on the Syntakt to get this engine to sound bigger, because pulse width modulation is Nick Bad over here, but like pulse width modulation sounds really good. Like it just makes a waveform sound incredibly full and fat, as opposed to extremely hollow, because like just moving the pulse on your waveform just hollows out the sound. It's just like removing harmonics. And this essentially, accentuates them. And then we have sample rate, bit rate built into the engine. I never understood this, why it's not just like in the amp section or something. You can barely hear it, honestly, because it goes pre-filter. You still can barely hear it anyway. To me, I always thought those were just strange, but that's just me. And like I said, I wanted to share my honest thoughts about this engine, or about this device. So there's a lot of cool things about the Syntakt that we could talk about. But what I want to do is make some music. I do want to talk about this actually, because I think this to me is like, and I love everybody at Elektron, I do, and the developers, I really like them too. I've had a chance to like hang out with them and talk with them. I just need to say this, if they haven't heard me say it before, which I'm sure they have. I don't get this. I've never understood why this exists, or why it exists in the form that it does. I don't personally use it ever. I don't know anyone who really does, honestly. There are some cool things you can do with it. I'm sure some people who are just die-hard Syntakt freaks are maybe using this a little bit harder than I am, but I can program this stuff 10 times faster than I can use these things. So if you hold function, you have these 4 mod tracks down in the bottom right corner, and they do some not that interesting stuff, but they do some stuff. So retrig turns your keyboard into a retrig keyboard, and you can retrig things on the retrig keyboard. On velocity, it does that with the velocity track, and then you get these mod tracks as well. And here's how it works, you know, like it's like, and I was like going like hitting these, like looking for these other buttons, because on the Digitakt, and just to show this off, just to be real with you, fully real with my homies on my channel, you have these keyboard modes. You have a ton of keyboard modes in your Digitakt, and you have a bunch in your Digitone as well. You have retrig, and the keyboard looks like this, much easier to use. Also, we have 16 retrigger values as opposed to 4. Mind you, these ones can be changed, and you can kind of do this like, you could do something like that. And let me make it so it really accentuates the sound a little bit further. Oh, I'm on my... I'm on the wrong track. Hang on here. You can see why you would use it. This is what you would do with it, but it doesn't have anything else it does. I don't know. I never thought it was that useful for me in particular. Someone else thinks it's great, then I'm glad. I'm very happy for you. We have a velocity version of it as well, and yeah, that's kind of what I have to say about those. They are they're definitely a thing. Now, what really bummed me out, I don't want to ham on this for too long. You can do some okay stuff with this, but what bummed me out is the fact that we only have one destination and 4 parameters, and we could have 4 destinations and 4 parameters and build macros and then play macros on here. To me, that's just a massive overlook on the development of the Syntakt. I don't know why it is that way, and I knew, since I know the developers and I've met them, I feel bad when I say stuff like that. But I do truly feel like I think that this could be more. Hope maybe there will be another update, and hopefully there is, and here you go. This is what you should do. You could make macros on here, and we could do performance effects with the macros. We could have 4 performance effects even. Hold down the button and have this be a high pass filter, a low pass filter, a high pass with delay, high pass with reverb. That's all possible. Or a modulator that triggers the LFO start time. We could do that with these different mod sections that we have to choose from, but we only have 1 destination and 4 values. So to me, this is just kind of like a weird thing. I'd rather have just had more tracks, even if it was more digital tracks. Could be 4 twin shot tracks. I don't know. Be cool if you could just turn them into tracks. There's a little bit of a criticism review here on part of the Syntakt design, but there are some useful things to use with retrig. Retrig is a great thing to have, but to use it as like the way that it's implemented here, I never quite understood it. Now, we've talked about kind of like the digital engines. I know I was talking while I was still pointing at the Digitakt there for a minute. We're saying how the mods, you have these 2 different modulators that you can select. You hold function to select them, and you have 4 positions, and they only target one thing. Could be, you know, doing performance effects and stuff like that. Would be sick. Just to say that again, because I'm probably going to chop this into a video or something. When we go down here, we get these 4 analog tracks on the Syntakt, and I think that this is the dopest part of the Syntakt. Honestly, I only need this. If this box was just these 4 tracks and it was a smaller box, I'd probably buy like 4 of them or something, and just have a whole bunch of them. But the engines that we have on the Syntakt's analog side of things is absolutely fire. Like, these tracks are dope. These engines are the best. They come from the rhythm. This is where you get all your drum sounds. Like, that's so solid. It has the high register. The high end is there in such a good way. BD Acoustic was one of their newer engines that they added, and BD the snare as well. The snare engine sounds awesome. All the engines and the analog side sound so good. Every single one of them, even utility noise, sounds fantastic. And then we have dual VCO, which, let's get real, is absolutely gangster. I mean, what? That's so sick. Every single time I pick up the Syntakt, because it replaced my Digitone, I have these rules that I like to follow. And for me, I have this like rule of 3. And I don't like to use more than 3 sound making devices at a time. Honestly, I don't like to use more than 3 devices at one given moment of production at a time. So like when I perform live, I have a Digitone 2, I have a Digitakt 2, an Octatrack, which they're running into, using it for performance effects. Then I have an M8 tracker, which I switch out the master delay or the master clock on with my M8 tracker into my Octatrack. And so it takes over, and the M8 and the Octatrack become their own thing, and then it switches back over to the Digitakt, Digitone, and the Octatrack, and they become their own thing. Octatrack is the only thing that actually makes it into every single setup that I have. And that's probably going to be the case until there's another Octatrack. If and when that happens, it will probably happen again in the same way, where the Octatrack ends up in every single setup. For a long time, it was the Syntakt in my Octatrack and a Digitakt, which I was mentioning before Digitone 2 came out. And man, the setup was sick. And actually, I go back and listen back to my sets, and the music I made with the Syntakt from this more like melodic perspective that I tend to come from often. Wow, it was like, I haven't made music like that since. And this is a very positive reflection, I would say, on the Syntakt, is that these sounds from the dual VCO cannot be made without the analog rhythm or without the Syntakt. This cannot be done. This just cannot be done. I don't care what you say. You cannot make that sound on your Digitone. An FM engine cannot make that sound. This is an analog oscillator, and it sounds like an analog oscillator. It's doing things in a way that it can't be done on the Digitone. It will not create the harmonic values that this dual VCO creates. It's just not physically possible. Physics will not permit it to be done. This thing sounds crazy, and it sounds awesome, and you can just get the deepest, wildest sounds. And like, they have this bend parameter because it was a drum engine turned into a synth engine, right? You can hear that it became a kick drum pretty quick. What's so good about this is you can take something like a track, and what I like to do is, always work in per track scaling. Let's just work in 4 bars for now. But you can take a track, give it some length even, and we could even cull the length later, but just have it play. Live record yourself just like, actually let's bring this note down because I don't want to play a C file. Too low of a note. Bring that up again, 1 more octave up. Like, that sounds crazy. We haven't used a single modulator. This engine is just bananas, and we're not going to go over every single engine. I wanted to point out the digital engines because, like I was saying, the analog engines are all really good. The digital engines are really simple. They're Model Cycles engines. They're kind of like, they do good stuff. I'm really glad they added Twin Shot because it's going to do a lot of heavy lifting for you, because you don't need a million samples to make good music. You just need some good sounding samples to make good music. And those could just be, your bread and butter samples like kick, snares, and hats to replace some particular kick, snares, and hats that you maybe are tired of using here. So you can, mix them together or layer them if you want, and you have the track layering that you can do too. I need to remind myself, where do I find those features again? Is it in my pattern? Track relations. That's what it is. Right. So one of the things that was added to the Syntakt recently, which is like an absolute crazy standout to me, and it was even more interesting and cooler to me than the twin shot engine itself, was this track relations. So it has choke groups, and then it also has track layering. So technically, we could layer 3 dual VCO tracks, because you can only use 3 dual VCOs. We could layer 3 dual VCOs on top of each other, and it would just make the most stupid sound. Just gigantic. Maybe not even something you would want to do. We could see some industrial group really leaning heavy into doing ideas like that, maybe detuning them, or you could make a triad out of them and sample them into your Digitact or something if you wanted. I don't know. But there's a lot of cool things you can do with that. And then we have our choke groups, which is unique to Syntakt and ToneVerk. Somehow ToneVerk and Syntakt have this weird thing together that the other boxes don't, but they both have choke groups because the ToneVerk has choke groups on the subtracks, which makes the subtracks 10 times more powerful than they were on the ToneVerk. Another machine that is worth us really diving back into very soon and talking about. And of course, it's Super Booth time, so there's so many new instruments coming out, and hopefully we see something from Elektron. I'm not sure yet, but I would love to see something from them. I don't care if it's a machine. It doesn't need to be, but anything would be great. But this dual VCO engine, man, this is the bread and butter for me. We also have the raw engine on the analog side. And it's just, as the name implies, we got one window, and it's just playing those oscillators. It's got noise, overdrive, a second decay envelope. Again, we have that added decay situation. I would just use it, and you could have, decay 2. I guess that's how you would use it, is with the detune. It's a great sounding engine. Honestly, the digital oscillator engine, like the digital virtual analog engine, sounds pretty great. Like when we were doing the pulse width modulation patch that we did earlier, that was a great engine. There's no reason not to just use that engine a lot too, and lean into that one. And honestly, I use that the most when I'm doing stuff that's more just like classic synthesis stuff, because it just sounds like a oscillator running into a filter. And then I use the amplifier effects and LFOs to make classic synth patches, because those are stuff that I like to make. The dual VCO lets you get really weird, and so I do prefer that engine. And then we have the chip engine, which I really never play with. It was added to the Syntakt and to the analog rhythm, and it's really cool. You can hear it doing its thing, but this is what it's really doing. It's our arpeggiator, essentially. And this does really, really weird stuff, and I'm sad that I haven't played with it enough. Like, super crazy stuff. Let's slow it down. We have this. Hold on, let's just do this again. Because I had the... It sounded crazy because of the modulation that was living on the track. Here's 16th notes. Paraphonic. Again. So you could, I believe, and I've never tried this, but it's something I do on the MA tracker, is you probably could use your LFO and then like parameter lock each one of these steps on the 16th note value in particular. And you might be able to use the LFO like another envelope generator. Maybe we go. I don't think it's gonna work. That kind of did work. Actually, it does kind of work. All right. This is actually really cool. Damn. Didn't think I would run into this idea. Nice. If you take something like this and you copy the page, hold page and hit copy, make your pages bigger, you can make a progression. They did add, you know, thank God they added this, but this is how I work now, and like I'm used to this now. I hold the page button and I jump through pages and I lock pages in and do my parameter locking page by page locked in so I can listen to that moment in time over and over without having to listen to the whole sequence. Not that it isn't good to listen to the whole sequence, you know, from time to time, and you should do that, of course, and it's probably what you're used to doing anyway. But it is really nice to be able to lock in a pattern and just listen to a bar repeatedly so that you can work on just that bar, right? So if we go here and change this, we'd have to lock these values in on this note right here, but we could go. So we have this one. Changing one of the notes because it's easy, and then go here and do it again. If you slow this down, like we're at a pretty fast tempo, 135. What if we brought this down to like 90 or 85? Excuse me. Oh, that was surprisingly good and surprisingly cool. I don't know why I haven't played with that engine more. That's too bad that I've neglected it for so long until today. Maybe I will have to lean a little further into my Syntakt than I've been doing so for the last year since Digitone 2 came out. Digitone 2 has an arpeggiator, but this is like, again, a walled garden concept. This is what's so cool about stuff like the Syntakt, and I think is great about stuff like this particular engine right here, like this chip engine, that it has this like arpeggiator idea, like it's arpeggiating through the notes like a chip tune, which I hadn't been calling chip. But if I applied that retrig to the same note value as the sequencer and I gave it an exponential envelope like I did, which is essentially emulating us using an envelope generator on a per note basis at a 16th note interval, which is sounding like an arpeggiator. It's working, it's doing the trick. I love the fact that I had to like make those jumps. Like some people might be frustrated with something like that. Somebody like me loves stuff like this. I like where I need to like, I'm like, you know, I've like got this, I don't even know what analogy I'm going for, but I like the idea that I had to like unlock this trick inside the Rubik's Cube of weirdness that inside the machine concept. Like I like that. I like getting like finding tricks and stuff. And if everything is available to you, if everything is on the table, you can eat any meal you want here, then for me it's like going on Netflix and trying to pick out a movie or a television show or whatever. I just end up doing that the whole time instead of like settling on something to watch because I'm like, that looks good. That looks good. And it goes on forever. And that's what the machines stop from happening for me. I think other people relate to that. I believe you do. But I deeply do. I deeply like the machine concept. And that sounds pretty cool. Actually, maybe I'll even just like, we'll just go to a new pattern. Go to pattern 1. Because I might want to revisit 7 later and make some music. Okay, so now I wanted to do, like, I've been talking about the Syntakt. It's got all these great engines. The synth engines are absolutely insane. The thing that's sad to me, the saddest part of the Syntakt to me is the fact that we only have the 4 analog tracks and that I have to use the digital engines for a lot of things. And the fact of the matter is that I don't want to use my analog tracks to do my drum stuff as much. Thank God for Twinshot kind of fixing that scenario. Twinshot kind of like makes it so I can use sampled drums on the digital tracks when I don't want to use the digital tracks. I have a particular workflow that I like to do in the Elektron world, and on my Digitakt 2 and my Digitone 2, considering that they both have the same amount of tracks, it's really easy for me to do this workflow. And the workflow is an A-B setup, so I like to have A on the top row and I like to have B on the bottom row. I can't do that on the Syntakt because it has 12 tracks, and 4 of the tracks are the weird modifier tracks that I don't use. And that kind of kills the A-B vibe a little bit. And also because you only have the 4 analog engines on the bottom, it's like it's a thing for me. It's kind of frustrating. I want to use the analog tracks constantly. I only want to use them, to be honest. I don't really care to use the digital ones. Sound fine. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm getting at, because this is a fantastic box. It's an FM, it's a Digitone engine, which I love. I just mean to say that I like the analog engines that much more that I want to use them all the time. So all the good drums are down here and all the best synth engines are down here and we only have a couple. And so I always have to contend with that fact that I have to like try and get really creative, and then I end up just using those bread and butter simple synth patches on the top tracks. So let me show you some stuff that I like to do with those digital engines. So say we're doing techno production. Let's do a little bit of music, sound design stuff. We play with that side chip engine for a minute. Let's play with some other engines. So like let's go to, we'll use track 5. We'll use track 5. I don't have a good reason why. But what I think is a great way to go about things is like, for instance, you could go to the Carbon engine, and instead of like trying to do toms or whatever that was wanting it to be, some sort of tombola or something, instead of trying to make sounds like that, which I don't want to make, remove the sweep. And you end up with this weird, kind of techno synth, where everything is disharmonic or inharmonic. I don't know what the word is. But check this out. So if we do some like polymetric emulation, we could actually do true polymetric. We just set this to infinity. If we want to do a polymetric track, and to do polymetric, like for real, actual polymetrics and polyrhythms, and this is something I've been talking about with people a lot lately. So if any of the students I've been working with hear this and they're like, "Hey, we was just talking about that," it's because we were talking that I'm thinking about this. But to do like polymetric, let's go to 140 and do some techno. To do true polymetric stuff on any of the Elektron boxes, you have to set your master length to infinity, and that's the way it is by default on the Toneberg, which is an interesting fact, I think. And the reason why that is that if I set this to a fixed value, like one of these 4 8-bar values, 2, 4, 8 bars, 1 bar even, it won't be polymetric because it's gonna evenly divide itself. Like it's gonna count a polymetric value, say 7, and then it's gonna reset after, it'll count 7, 7, and then 2 if it was, say, the length of a bar. So it goes 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, and then once it gets close to 64, it's going to try to count to 7, bounce off of 64, and reset to the 1. And we're not truly doing polymetric stuff at that point, even though it sounds very polymetric. It just isn't, though. It just isn't that, the way that you think about it in, typical music theory. So what you would do is if you set this to infinity, it really does cycle 7s forever. And so you will get these like interesting rhythms when it's paired with stuff that is doing an even beat. And I think when you're doing techno production, something I've noticed and I think is really useful is pairing something like a straight beat with a polyrhythmic beat. Not necessarily polymetric, because the polymetric beats often fall right on top of each other. Like they'll fall on that 16th note resolution. So let me show you what I mean by that, and we'll make a little techno track while we're doing it. And so like say I have this like 7-step sequence and we throw some steps in here, and maybe we're doing something like this. We're already like on our way to techno, right? Shorten this up. We even change the envelope mode to the AHD so we can just get these quick decay envelopes. And we don't even need to lock in notes. That's not the idea. What we do is we lock in like in harmonicity. And you can get these like cool, kind of like modular synth type sounds. We can even do it again. Like we're on our way to techno paradise already. That's why I like using engines like the drum synth engines in the FM side to do like my top end melody for techno production, because it does stuff like this. And I'm not playing with tune, I'm not playing with notes. This stuff doesn't matter. If I was doing techno production or improv techno or something like that on my modular synth, I wouldn't be plugging in a bunch of notes. I wouldn't be putting in C major 7 chords or something like that. I'd be just playing with the timbre and the rhythm. It'd be all about timbre and rhythm. Yeah, exactly, Matt. Exactly. We can go to the twin shot, switch over to just one of my samples, and let's see. Let's find a kick drum. Did I not put kicks in here? Oh, come on, tell me I did. They're all playing in reverse. I guess I didn't. I'll have to remedy that. Maybe we won't use twin shot right now. Let's just get a kick drum from modern. Or no, I mean, honestly, the best kick drums, of course, come from the analog engine. I mean, even in its default value, hard sounds fantastic. And we have a polymetric sequence truly playing polymetrically on top of this fantastic analog engine. It'd be cool if the waveform interpolated. Yes, very nice. Now, if we wanted to do like a polymetric rhythm, like say we have like a B-side sequence for this synth sound that we did on 5. Here's what we would do. Let's mute 5. We'll go over to 6, and let's get another engine. Maybe we do Swarm. Maybe we do Toy and try and get some weird stuff. Or actually, we could do it with like a classic bass line. We could do it over here. There we go. Let's leave it on the dual VCO and just filter this out. Nice. Oops. Forgot you can't switch that over. So if you want to do a polyrhythmic experience, here's what you do. You could use a 16th note, or just a single bar. Put a trigger down, go into your retrig menu, which is up arrow on here, turn it on, set it something like 12, and set the length to the entire bar. Or less than a bar sounds really nice too. And let's bring the track level down. Which is dope. Like, I think you can do this in like something you can do to like take this a step further. Say you wanted to do like a bunch of different notes, is like you can do your, let's grab this and put some of these right here too. We could have another one of these at the end, but only do it for a shorter length of time. You know, do it for the last 3 steps. And even do a different note. Maybe go up a minor third. We are in C, playing in a C C minor chord so far. Ornamento. And you could change the speed of its rate. So you could do a 16th note at the end or something. The thing about it though, wait, let me see if this is, yeah, see how my reverb isn't being triggered despite the sound being there? It wants me to put the reverb there, so I have to put like an actual note. Now we could use our twin shot, which I like to do on 3. That works. I like that. I mean, I like this workflow. We're not really thinking about notes, we're just kind of playing with these engines and trying to find these interesting rhythms and these interesting spots to mess with. And I don't think I would use one of my analog engines for like a clap personally, so I've put it on 2. So I wanted to point that out. This is how you would do like polyrhythmic sequences. If you do them really slow too, they sound really nice. We actually only need a 16th note, so just do that up. Do it for the whole bar and see what happens. So I think it's a lot of fun to play with that in particular, and then you pair it with something like we have a polyrhythm on top of a polymetric sequence, and then we have our drums doing some straight beats. And altogether, like there's a lot happening. I kind of like it with just that one bar though. Sounds very vowel. You can do this kind of idea with all of these, like all of these digital engines, and just try and get some like really weird, stuff. Another cool thing you can do with the retrig that I really like is that when you're doing the retrigger, we could do it over on this baseline, and we'll just offset this baseline. Not make it go for so long really quick. Maybe it goes for half a bar. You could take a note, like maybe right here, and then turn retrigger on, and you set the velocity all the way up, or to a high value, and we want the length to be like the very last portion. Okay, but what you do next is you actually turn the velocity all the way down, so it actually goes up from 0 and all the way up. And then you can lock that in. There's some cool stuff you can do with that. Let me get rid of this track code. It sounds really obvious how cool it is on like a hi-hat track. We turn that on and do 3 steps, bring the velocity all the way up and the trigger level all the way down. And you can really get some, some flams, some more accentuated percussion this way. Well, I'm really surprised I didn't put any kicks or claps in when I did this. That's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. Place. I mean, with 2 notes, you can get pretty far with the retrake menu and doing the polyrhythms. Alternatively, you can just draw in a rhythm by just throwing some steps down. And I really like kind of like a minimal sound myself, but if we wanted to get a little ravey, we could throw one of these chords in. Oops. Sponsor me, LaCroix. Pineapple coconut, made from real pineapples and coconuts. That was your commercial. First one's free. Switch this kick drum out. I'm getting sick of it already. Condition on it? Hey. love this engine. It's so weird. Really fun. I love playing with those different rhythms and just, you could just use just the drums alone and kind of like omit any of the, you know, the synth engines here, and just kind of like if we got rid of the bass, we just played with this. I kind of just even ignored that we had a bass engine. We try this a different engine here. Maybe use one of these kick engines for it. So it doesn't matter, does it? That's weird. Yeah, these don't work as well for that. The way we did it with the digital ones. It is better just to stick with these engines. Whoa. Is that 16th notes? Oh, that's crazy. What if I did something like that? I'm getting carried away exploring this engine because I don't ever use it, and until today I like leaning into it a little bit, but kind of got like a housey vibe now with that little chord there. As far as like a percussion box goes, this thing's pretty killer. put some darker tone into this too. Unlike to like the Swarm engine and like kind of like side chaining, or at least emulating side chain. We can do it two different ways. We could send it to the filter. So we do have this filter. We can choose what goes there. We want to send track 4. We could send our baseline over there too, which is on track 3. And by default, it's got the overdrive turned on. We turn that off. And maybe we don't want it to go for so long. 16th note could be fine, I suppose. The Swarm engine does sound so good. Really fun box. So I've had a lot of like critical things to say about the Syntakt and a ton of positive things to say about the Syntakt. And I think it's a lot of fun to explore. There's so many different little techniques that you can get into to really make this box shine, and it can do anything from like this like, you know, minimal techno type experience, minimal-ish. There's quite a bit going on in the percussion here. But it can do this stuff extremely well, where the sounds are very synthesized sounding. Despite me using some samples here, there is something in the essence of the music that feels very authentic, as opposed to a sampler or a digital synthesizer. It really does a good job of capturing that like analog vibe that you would get with more of like a modular synthesizer. And I think it sounds awesome. So I really love the box. Syntakt, the Syntakt truly is like a gateway drug into the Elektron ecosystem. No one says dub techno quite like you. It's house to me still. That's probably true. I think you get more diverse sounds with the Syntakt and add a module like a Waldorf for external sounds, and you have an incredible powerful system for synthesis-wise for not such a large amount of cache. I'm not going to disagree with that. Bring the mustache back, Jeffrey Bianca. What's up, dude? We'll bring it back eventually. Having a mustache is a little bit of extra work in your life. I know it's a very small amount, but all about streamline that experience. I guess shaving is also work. I could just not shave, and then that's the thing too. Are the Syntakt's MIDI channels polyphonic? I believe so. I don't know why I can't remember the answer to that question, but let's take a look really quick. I think so. Yeah. 4 notes of polyphony. So you have your root note, and then you have, note 2, note 3, and note 4. Yes, 4 notes. It was already answered. I didn't need to answer that. Thanks for the tutorials. You're welcome. You did end up selling your A4, Mr. Aegis. Bummer. I have not sold my A4. I don't think I ever will. I don't think I'll ever sell any of my Elektron boxes, actually. I have all the OG Digis, and I don't have an OG Octatrack, but I do have 2 Mark IIs, and 4 in a Riddim, and of course all these. And I don't have a model samples. I never bought a model samples. I don't think I ever want. I don't want a model samples. I didn't want a model samples when it came out, either. Even though I think it's a great sounding box because it has, you know, super void reverb and the nice stereo delay that you get that comes with all the Elektron boxes. But for the most part, I don't really care for sample players as much as I do for samplers, because I'm more interested in capturing sounds and manipulating them than I am just playing back a sound. It peeves me more than it should that they included those on the Syntakt and never improved on it. You're clearly talking about the modifier tracks, because there's nothing else on there that's as frustrating as those tracks. Gassing for another Syntakt, I feel like to run another piece of gear through the saturation effects, it's worth it. You have a tone verc, but the analog saturation from the heat is something you miss. Analog heat plus effects is a really, really nice unit. Or just analog heat. Honestly, if I could recommend anything to anybody, would be go find yourself a used analog, to anyone, I mean anybody, people that aren't even making music. Go find yourself a used analog heat Mark 1. You don't even need the Mark 2. And you don't need the heat plus effects unless you want the bass to mono, or unless you want those effects. I don't know, maybe that's your thing. It is, you know, a nicer box, that's for sure. But I'd say like the Analog Heat Mark 1 has all the features that you need to get the essence of what is the best part about the Analog Heat, which is a stereo distortion box. And it is absolutely fire. and totally worth picking up. I believe it 100%. The track relations, yes, we talked about that a bit. We didn't really use it, but like you could, I mean, I guess you could totally treat this like, I mean, if we were to, let's do a little experiment, because why not? We have time. We do whatever we want. So if we do the track relations, once we go into our, yes. Right? Yes, this is what we do. And you do have the control config, thank the Lord. So those are chokes, and those are dope. Let's do track 1 for now, and let's go to track 1 will trigger. No, let's do track 9 will trigger these other 2 tracks. Okay. And then let's make these tracks all dual VCOs. And let's give them all just an envelope that actually ends. Hey. And then we can, you know, create like a... Oh yeah, that's not going to do anything. We have to do it from the actual oscillator. Here's a polyphonic Syntakt. My God, that sounds really good. Holy smokes. And we can use Control-Alt to control all the filters at the same time. That's pretty cool. Hey man, I love your videos, but sometimes they're really long. Well, it is a live stream. So they are 2 hours, typically. Where are we at now? 2 hours and 1 minute, almost exactly. So yes, they are really long, aren't they? Can you do... Oh no, you can't do track delay. Or amp delay. Or, yeah, amp delay. Super weird. never thought about doing this. I should make some samples for my Digitect. And then you can make each track its own, like... Sounds pretty nutty. Crazy. I guess you could do that and make like 7th chords and then just do one at C and then sample that. You can't really do it here. The problem is like you can't do fully analog 7ths because track 12 doesn't let you do like dual VCO or anything. It's just a bunch of symbols, which is super strange. So many different kinds of symbols. The track relations is pretty cool. The choke groups is even better, I think. But the track relations is pretty cool if you want to do some like really big synth sounds, because you could essentially just use each track as like an oscillator and then just dial in each oscillator individually and layer them on top of each other with the track level. I guess, for instance, let's check it out. If we did it with the digital side of things and go to our pattern config, do track relations. I did not have track relations with that person. Let's see, if we went in here and then we could go grab like a bunch of, ooh, we could do a polyphonic swarm engine. That could be kind of cool. Copy, paste, 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 paste. Oops. Damn it. Oh, cool. And then what if we went to use the retrig thing? Wow, it's actually really, really cool. Kind of blown away by that right now. And then you could do chords by copy. Let's do like, see if we can just do 2 chords. Wait. How will we do that? If I go to this track and I put a trigger down here and offset the oscillator, will that override? It should. It does. Oh, look at us. We're doing polyphony on the Syntakt. And then if we had each track have its own stereo field. Oof. Now run it all through the analog effects track. That's a good idea. Here's something you cannot do on the Digitone or the Digitakt, or any other Elektron box for that matter. This is a Syntakt thing only. Takes a lot of work. We're kind of doing something pretty cool here, I'm not gonna lie. Whoa. sick right there. Try that chord engine now. Oh, boring. Idea. Let's do side bits. Oh, come on now. This isn't what I wanted to do, but I like it. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but I like it. I don't know. Drop the bat beat. I know, I feel it too. We could actually do it over here if we wanted. Well, that was an unexpected little journey into a really nice place. Really fun. So I guess the question, if it was asked to me, should you get a Syntakt in 2026? The answer is absolutely. That was crazy. This experience alone right at the end is just awesome. And also something we could probably do with an Analog 4. Maybe. Kind of. Only 4 tracks though. A lot more tracks here. I mean, this is like a... We could really like... If I was to sit and manipulate this for long enough and like make iterations and pattern after pattern, we could have this be this like huge cinematic like masterpiece kind of scenario, I think. And then we have stuff like this. Does this have the... We need a sound like that should like only happen every now and then. So like not there and not the rest of the tracks. Yeah, what? Awesome. All right, folks. That was supposed to stop. That was supposed to stop. Stop. Oh my God. All right. So Syntakt, fantastic. We made a bunch of different patterns on here, which is really cool, and explored a bunch of different territory on the Syntakt, which I really wanted to do today. Just sit down and have a good go at the box, because it's been a while since I'd given it some attention, some like real attention, and I'm really glad I did, because this ended up being a really fun experience, and hopefully inspires you to pick out your Syntakt from off the shelf if it's sitting there. And if it's not, you're smarter than I've been, and I shouldn't have been ignoring my Syntakt, because it's absolutely fire. My name is Matthew, aka EZBOT. This has been a live stream. We do this every Thursday, actually. We're switching it to Thursday, but I've been trying to do it 2 days a week. I've been talking about this for years, trying to stream twice a week. And so Tuesdays and Thursdays are what I aim for doing live streams on. If you would like to support this channel, you can visit patreon.com/EZBOT and visit the Patreon. Alternatively, you can subscribe to this channel. You can also visit coffee.com/EZBOT if you want to pick up my performance templates. You heard a little something of like on the performance template side when I was doing this. This is some of my like performance effects that you can have on your Octatrack if you have an Octatrack. And I have tons of effects and different performance concepts that I play with and offer as a reward on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/EZBOT. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel, which is really useful. There's affiliate links, and I have a whole list of all my gear on my website if you're interested in what I use in my studio as far as recording and mastering goes and all of that kind of stuff. Microphones, headphones, everything is on that list. You can check it out there, and there's affiliate links which cost you nothing and help pay for this channel to continue. If you enjoyed this, please consider doing one of those things I just mentioned. It's a big help to me. This is the only thing that I do. Teach hardware music production almost exclusively, run my Patreon, and do this YouTube channel. And this is all I do to put food on the table. So every little bit of support goes a really long way for me, and I appreciate it deeply. I love everybody who visits this channel and comments and shares their ideas, and yeah, couldn't be more grateful. So thank you everybody for hanging out, and everybody have a fantastic Tuesday evening. Don't forget to get your mom something for Mother's Day. It's coming up really soon. Just a reminder. I don't want to forget. All right, folks. See you next time.